For over 70 years, gun lovers have fought the same battle. The hard-hitting .357 Magnum versus the heavy-hitting .45 ACP. Forums go crazy. Range talk turns into arguments. Shooters pick a side and never let go. But here's the thing nobody wants to say out loud. This debate was never really about which bullet wins. It was always about a truth that makes both sides look wrong. We went through the ballistic data. We looked at real-world results. And what we found, sitting right in the middle of this 70-year war, will change how you look at both cartridges forever. This is the .357 versus .45 ACP truth nobody wants to admit. The Smith & Wesson Model 29 sits on the table next to a Colt 1911. Two legendary handguns, two iconic cartridges, one truth that changes everything. Smith & Wesson introduced the .357 Magnum in 1935, promising revolutionary stopping power in a revolver platform. The company claimed their new cartridge could push a 158-grain bullet at over 1,400 feet per second. Law enforcement agencies took notice immediately. The cartridge emerged from the collaboration between Smith & Wesson and ammunition manufacturer Winchester. Elmer Keith, the legendary gun writer and hunter, had been experimenting with hot-loaded .38 special cartridges that were generating dangerous pressure levels in standard .38 revolvers. Keith needed something stronger, something that could handle the power he was chasing. The development team lengthened the .38 special case by just over 1/8 of an inch and strengthened the chamber design. This created a cartridge that couldn't be accidentally chambered in weaker .38 special revolvers, preventing catastrophic failures. The .357 Magnum was born from a desire for more power wrapped in a safety mechanism. Law enforcement agencies in the 1930s and 40s faced a growing problem. Criminals were using increasingly powerful weapons and heavily modifying getaway vehicles. The standard .38 special revolvers carried by police officers were proving inadequate in serious confrontations, especially when trying to shoot through the thick steel bodies of V8-era automobiles. The .357 Magnum promised to level the playing field. Highway patrol units in several states adopted the cartridge immediately. The devastating muzzle blast and unmistakable sound of a .357 firing became psychological weapons as much as physical ones. Criminals knew the reputation, and that reputation often ended confrontations before they began. But the .357 had competition that predated it by decades. John Moses Browning designed the .45 automatic Colt pistol cartridge in 1905 for the United States military. The Army had just fought the Philippine-American War and discovered a harsh reality. The standard .38 long Colt revolvers issued to troops were failing to stop determined enemies, even with multiple hits. The military conducted extensive testing, most notably the Thompson-Lagarde tests of 1904, which would be considered brutal by today's standards. They tested various cartridges on live animals and cadavers in Chicago slaughterhouses, measuring penetration depth, tissue damage, and stopping effect. The testing board concluded that a bullet must have a minimum diameter of .45 caliber to be effective. The .45 ACP consistently delivered the superior results they demanded. Browning's design philosophy centered on bullet diameter and momentum rather than velocity. The .45 ACP pushed a 230-grain bullet at approximately 850 feet per second. This created a large wound channel with deep penetration and reliable expansion in the lead bullets available at the time. The cartridge proved itself during World War I, where American troops praised the stopping power of their Colt 1911 pistols. Stories emerged from the trenches of German soldiers being dropped instantly by single shots from the .45. These accounts, whether entirely accurate or not, cemented the cartridge's reputation for decades. By World War II, millions of American servicemen had trained with the .45 ACP. They returned home with deep familiarity and trust in the cartridge. This created a massive civilian market for .45 caliber handguns that continues today. The fundamental difference between these cartridges lies in their design philosophy. The .357 Magnum achieves its effect through velocity and energy. The .45 ACP relies on mass and momentum. This difference created the foundation for 70 years of debate. Examining the ballistic performance reveals stark contrasts that fuel the ongoing controversy. A standard .357 Magnum load fires a 158-grain bullet at 1,400 feet per second. generating roughly 690 foot-pounds of energy. The numbers are impressive and represent genuine stopping power. The 45 ACP standard load pushes a 230-grain bullet at 850 feet per second, producing only 360 to 400 foot-pounds of energy depending on the exact load. On paper, the 357 appears to be the clear winner, but energy numbers tell only part of the story. Momentum, the product of mass times velocity, reveals a different perspective. The 357 Magnum generates approximately 31 pound-seconds of momentum. The 45 ACP produces 35 pound-seconds. The heavier, slower bullet maintains more momentum despite lower energy. Penetration testing in ballistic gelatin shows interesting results. The 357 typically penetrates deeper than modern FBI standards recommend for law enforcement use. Standard loads often exceed 18 inches of penetration, sometimes reaching 24 inches or more. This deep penetration can pose risks in urban environments where bullets might pass through targets and endanger bystanders. The 45 ACP consistently delivers penetration in the 12 to 16-inch range, meeting modern standards while creating larger wound channels. The bigger diameter bullet displaces more tissue and creates more substantial temporary cavity effects. But ballistic gelatin testing, while useful, has significant limitations. Gelatin doesn't account for heavy clothing, bone, or the complex reality of human anatomy. Furthermore, real-world engagements often involve obstacles. Police departments that adopted the 357 Magnum in the 1960s and 70s began collecting real-world data. Officers reported spectacular success against unarmored targets at longer ranges. The flat trajectory and devastating terminal performance made the 357 ideal for rural law enforcement, where engagement distances might exceed typical handgun ranges. However, urban departments discovered drawbacks. The powerful cartridge over-penetrated in many situations, creating liability concerns. The bright muzzle flash and deafening report caused temporary blindness and hearing loss in low-light encounters. Officers found follow-up shots far more difficult due to heavy recoil in lightweight revolvers. Military and law enforcement testing of the 45 ACP revealed different characteristics. The cartridge consistently stopped threats with fewer rounds fired, provided the user could manage the heavy pistol it was chambered in. The large bullet created immediate incapacitation in many cases, reducing the need for multiple hits. But both cartridges shared a common challenge that would eventually reshape the entire debate, leading us to the core issue. The rise of modern vehicular combat and urban barriers in the 1970s and 80s changed everything. Criminals weren't just fighting in the open, they were shooting from behind car doors, angled windshield auto glass, and heavy winter coats. This reality exposed a truth that neither 357 nor 45 advocates wanted to acknowledge. Traditional bullet designs from both camps often failed catastrophically when striking these modern barriers. Lead hollow points would plug with heavy clothing and fail to expand, essentially turning them into full metal jacket rounds. Other times, the bullets would deflect off the steep angle of a car windshield, completely missing the intended target inside. Handgun cartridges face limitations that no amount of raw power or wide bullet diameter could naturally overcome. The focus had to shift from basic caliber size to barrier blindness. Law enforcement agencies began conducting extensive testing to determine optimal cartridge selection. The FBI's 1986 Miami shootout became the watershed moment that changed law enforcement thinking about handgun cartridges forever. On April 11, 1986, FBI agents engaged two heavily armed bank robbers in a running gunfight through the streets of Miami. During the firefight, Agent Jerry Dove fired a 9mm Winchester silver-tip bullet that struck suspect Michael Platt in the right forearm. The bullet severed his brachial artery, exited his arm, and entered his right chest cavity, collapsing his lung. However, it stopped about 1 inch short of his heart. While the bullet traveled through nearly 9 inches of human tissue, it failed to reach the central nervous system or immediately incapacitate the threat. Platt continued fighting for several minutes, killing 2 agents and wounding 5 others before succumbing to his wounds. The incident sparked a complete reevaluation of law enforcement ammunition selection and proved that a bullet's ability to reach vital organs through intermediate barriers or limbs was paramount. The FBI created specific testing protocols that measured penetration depth, expansion, and retained weight after passing through barriers like heavy denim, drywall, plywood, and auto glass. They determined a bullet must penetrate a minimum of 12 inches, but no more than 18 inches, in calibrated ballistic gelatin. Initially, the FBI concluded that 9mm was insufficient and adopted the massive 10mm auto cartridge. They sought maximum tissue damage and barrier penetration. However, the brutal recoil of the 10mm proved too much for standard agents to shoot quickly and accurately. This led to the creation of the .40 Smith & Wesson, a slightly shortened, lower-velocity version of the 10mm that fit into 9mm-sized handguns. For 2 decades, the .40 caliber dominated law enforcement, but bullet technology didn't stop evolving. Modern testing soon showed that ammunition design mattered far more than the caliber stamped on the side of the barrel. Engineers figured out how to bond the lead core of a bullet to its copper jacket, preventing the bullet from breaking apart when hitting auto glass. They redesigned hollow point cavities so they wouldn't plug with denim. A well-designed 9mm hollow point could suddenly outperform an older, poorly designed .45 or .357 load. Bullet construction, expansion characteristics, and barrier penetration became the primary drivers of terminal performance. This technological shift revealed the uncomfortable reality of the modern era. Today's premium defensive ammunition performs remarkably similarly across all standard duty calibers. Federal HST, Speer Gold Dot, and Hornady critical duty ammunition deliver consistent, reliable expansion and penetration, whether they are fired from a 9mm, a .40 caliber, a .45 ACP, or a .357 Magnum. The FBI's current testing and subsequent return to the 9mm cartridge proves that shot placement and capacity matter infinitely more than traditional cartridge selection. A 9mm bullet to the central nervous system stops threats immediately. A .357 Magnum bullet to a non-vital area may fail entirely to incapacitate an attacker. Medical evidence from trauma centers strongly supports this conclusion. Emergency room physicians consistently report that gunshot wound severity correlates with bullet placement and the structures damaged, not the caliber. A small caliber bullet that damages vital organs or the central nervous system proves exponentially more effective than a large caliber bullet that passes through soft tissue without hitting critical anatomy. The military's adoption of the 9mm cartridge for the M17 pistol program reflects this modern understanding. The Army chose the Sig Sauer P320 not because 9mm is inherently superior to .45 ACP in a vacuum, but because soldiers can fire 9mm more accurately under stress, and modern double-stack magazines allow them to carry 21 rounds of ammunition compared to the standard 7 or 8 rounds in a traditional 1911. Accuracy testing consistently shows that most shooters perform better with lower recoiling cartridges. The .357 Magnum's heavy recoil makes rapid follow-up shots incredibly difficult for anyone who doesn't dedicate significant time to training. The .45 ACP's moderate recoil allows faster shot-to-shot recovery than the Magnum, but it is still slower than 9mm options. Training data from police academies reveals that recruits qualify faster, shoot tighter groupings, and achieve higher overall scores with smaller caliber handguns. The reduced recoil allows more practice with the same ammunition budget. Less flinching and more practice translates directly to better performance when lives are on the line. This creates a serious point of friction for enthusiasts who have invested their personal identity in caliber selection. The truth is that modern defensive ammunition has virtually eliminated the performance gaps that started this debate in the first place. The psychological aspect of the caliber war runs much deeper than ballistic gelatin. Gun enthusiasts often choose cartridges based on image, tradition, and emotional attachment rather than objective modern criteria. The .357 represents rugged individualism, the golden age of law enforcement, and raw, untamed power. The .45 embodies rich military tradition, 2 world wars, and proven combat effectiveness from a bygone era. These emotional connections explain why the arguments continue raging despite overwhelming scientific evidence. Admitting that caliber choice is largely irrelevant threatens cherished beliefs about power, effectiveness, and even masculine identity in the shooting community. The reality extends beyond just these two legendary cartridges. The entire handgun caliber debate has become a massive distraction from the considerations that actually win gunfights: reliability, practical accuracy, magazine capacity, and shootability matter more than whether the bullet diameter measures .355 inches or .452 inches. Professional shooters and elite military units increasingly prioritize ammunition capacity and weapon controllability over individual cartridge power. Special operations forces routinely choose high-capacity 9mm pistols. The ability to quickly deliver 3 or 4 accurate shots into a threat is fundamentally more valuable than the theoretical advantage of a single, slightly wider bullet. Of course, sporting and hunting applications reveal different rules. Both the .357 Magnum and .45 ACP remain absolutely excellent choices for specialized applications. Their suitability simply depends on the intended use rather than inherent defensive superiority. For hunting medium-sized game, the .357 Magnum excels when paired with proper hardcast or hunting hollow-point bullets. The flat trajectory and high velocity make it effective at ranges where the .45 ACP drops like a rock. Hunters in areas where shots might exceed 50 yards benefit massively from the .357's ballistic advantages. Meanwhile, the .45 ACP remains highly popular among competitive shooters who value inherent mechanical accuracy and mild pushing recoil rather than a sharp snap. The large, slow bullet provides excellent feedback on steel targets and cuts clean, easily scorable holes in paper targets. Both cartridges maintain strong followings among enthusiasts who appreciate their historical significance and mechanical elegance. The .357 represents the pinnacle of 20th century revolver cartridge development. The .45 ACP showcases John Browning's absolute genius in creating a cartridge that remains incredibly relevant and widely used well over a century after its invention. But acknowledging these specific strengths doesn't change the fundamental truth about modern self-defense. The gear industry unfortunately profits from perpetuating these caliber debates. Ammunition manufacturers, gun writers, and firearms companies benefit from continued controversy. Definitive, settled science doesn't sell magazines or generate online engagement like an ongoing, emotionally charged argument. Social media algorithms have amplified these debates beyond any reasonable proportion. Gun forums feature thousands of threads arguing about stopping power. YouTube channels generate millions of views by pitting one cartridge against another. The system rewards controversy over consensus, ensuring that the arguments continue regardless of the data. The truth is that both the .357 and the .45 represent mature, proven technology. Neither is universally superior, because a police officer in a dense urban environment faces entirely different challenges than a civilian carrying concealed. This nuanced reality frustrates people seeking simple answers to complex life or death questions. But the better question has never been which cartridge is universally better. The question is, which cartridge allows you to place the most accurate hits on a target in the shortest amount of time? Law enforcement and the civilian market have largely moved beyond this argument, overwhelmingly standardizing on 9mm pistols. The combination of adequate terminal performance, high magazine capacity, and user controllability makes the 9mm the dominant choice for modern personal protection. The truth emerging from decades of ballistic testing is quite simple. Modern defensive hollow points perform adequately regardless of the caliber stamped on the casing. While the .357 and .45 ACP will maintain passionate followings and are far from obsolete, the century-old debate about which is definitively better completely misses the larger point. Software matters more than hardware. Training, shot placement, draw speed, and mental preparation matter infinitely more than your choice of caliber. A highly practiced shooter with a 9mm will consistently survive encounters that would overwhelm an occasional shooter holding a powerful .357 Magnum. The uncomfortable truth nobody wants to admit is that the great caliber debate has finally ended. The gun and the ammunition are just tools. The person behind the trigger matters far more than numbers on a specification sheet. The debate will undoubtedly continue online to serve emotional needs, but true practical defensive effectiveness requires looking past caliber specifications and focusing on the real work of preparation.